back to Berlin, Germany, home of the LEC, where we are getting ready for an action-packed day 2 of the 2022 season, culminating in our match of the week, the battle between the two perceived favorites, Fnatic and Team Vitality. My name is Quickshot, and I'm joined once again by Trouble and Gulborg, as it's part 2 of our 3-day super weekend.
Oh, I'm really excited. I mean, I think yesterday absolutely delivered. We have some huge overreactions from day 1, and I can't wait to get even more on day 2.
Yeah, I want to build on those overreactions because one game sample size, it's really not enough to really...
It's enough for the fans.
It is all you need to make a bold statement. That's how this works.
That is
how this works.
That's what we'll do.
Well, listen, talking about bold statements, yesterday we saw our back-to-back champions of 2021, the Mad Lions, convincingly taking down Perks and Team Vitality, the supposed super team, in the opening match of the season. And I mean, when we look back at the games, first of all, the spicy draft coming out from Mad Lions, I was a bit surprised, but Trouble, you weren't.
This was max, start to finish. I think this guy is an absolute mastermind. Every time he has to work with rookies, it feels like his team behind him and himself just reset so hard and so well at what works with their team. And I think every single piece just clicked together so perfectly yesterday.
Yeah, I want to take it back to what Mac talked about as well, because he was talking about these rookies, but he was also talking about the fact that they brought in a lot of versatility, and I think we saw that yesterday. The fact that they're willing to bring in a rookie mid laner who's going to go Yasuo. The fact that you have Unforgiven in the bot lane who's going to go Karthus. You can already see this versatility he's talking about. But not only that, you see the veterans coming so nicely together around these rookies to really help them solidify themselves here in our league. The fact that when Elyoya finally gets the pressure to be around the mid lane, he'll be there. The fact when Kai'Sa finally has prior down in the bot lane, he'll be in the mid lane as well, just to facilitate these rookies to put them in a position where they're so good. Elyoya, I mean, on the jungler Diana did so well.
I think Elyoya heard everyone yesterday talk sheesh about the Mad Lions, because they were like, they're bringing in rookies. What can they do? We lost Kazi, we lost Human. This guy's still here. 8, 1, and 10, 90% kill participation. He destroyed the entire map. This guy showed why he was a pivotal factor in Mad Lions' success on the back-to-back last year.
Elyoya, the solo super team, apparently. Yeah. Let's turn our attention to the rest of the league, though, because G2 Esports, they also started with a W with their brand new lineup. Now, Trouble, you were talking a little bit about FLICKR and Targamas at the beginning of the day. What do you make of G2's performance yesterday?
I feel like, okay, it wasn't the most decisive we have ever seen G2 play, but I think it was a really good sign of what their bot lane can do, especially in a meta where the bot lane can get a little bit isolated, having not one but 2 new members, 2 rookies down in that bot lane that have never worked together before. I think it was a good showing, and with the solo kill, well, solo on the 2v2 perspective, I think it was a really good showing at the start to see what's to come for that G2.
Yeah, but I think already now, G2, a good word to describe them would be shaky, because that 2v2 went both ways. You even saw it on the replay just now, came down to a little bit of an Elder flip, but I still think we see some of the strong pillars of G2 that can take them there. I think Jankos and Caps fulfilled their jobs yesterday. Jankos was the sole frontliner on a Xin Zhao where he had to peel for full ranged, okay? So his job at this point is not very easy, but he played it out as he should towards the late game. And Caps on the LeBlanc, like, this guy continuously surprises me in a lot of ways, where he's just able to deal with the pressure, no matter the teammates he's having on the roster, still find ways to make himself known in the laning phase, but also later towards skirmishes, where he'll still find solo kills on the LeBlanc.
I mean, that solo kill into Broken Blade was literally disgusting. There's no other way to say it. Finn, thank you. I did that in rehearsal as well, in my head. Anyways, the top 5 teams from Summer, they all won their opening games yesterday. So let's take a look at the standings. Obviously, after one game, 5 teams tied at the top, 5 teams down at the bottom. I don't think it's too surprising.
Oh my God, Team Vitality last.
I felt like the games were quite close yesterday. We only saw one real blowout, and I'm very interested to see how that develops over the weekend.
Yeah, because is it just because it's spring, teams are getting used to it? I mean, probably yes, but let's take it to the other end as well, right? Maybe our league is just getting a bit closer as well, with the bottom teams finally rising up a little bit. And we were talking about some of them, you know, haven't still played, still having some of this pre-built synergy. Going into day 2 was the first stage of stage jitters. Is it something that we can now counter them finally coming together? It's going to be interesting to have a look at.
I mean, I cannot wait to see how these new teams and players do develop throughout the course of the season. But as we said, 1 game sample size. So that means that this was the perfect time to ask you at home to send us your best overreactions. We are going to read a few of them from yesterday to decide if they are both plausible or whether they are in fact overreactions. Let's start with the very first one from FNC Okami. This reads, Hilly Spring Season season MVP. Just as a quick consideration, 0 deaths versus Team BDS yesterday.
I'm checking.
The first deathless game since Worlds 2020 quarters.
Hold it. I'm checking for the dub. Yep, given. Absolutely. Hylissang MVP. I think he always has a bunch of question marks. It's like, the thin line between Hero and Inter every single time. But Hylissang Rakan is one of the GOATs. And I think it absolutely showed. He was all over the map. I love his performance.
And this is definitely taking my vote as well, because this is a guy that has an explosive playstyle that's always interesting to watch. He didn't die yesterday, but even if he did die, I mean, come on, we'll still be willing to give him some of these MVP performances just because he always finds this clutch factor. So is it in a reaction on day one? Yes, granted, because it's only on game, but it's definitely something we can follow along the season.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you with the next one. Hen Kellar says, Hilly is the best Western support. Oh wait, this is no overreaction. So that is in the entire West.
Okay, so that's where I'm finally maybe taking a little bit of a step back.
So you think that is an overreaction?
Yes, but to still give it some justice in the statement, I think Hylissang is the best support at his own specific style because it is so unique. So the value he brings with his style to a team, you cannot compare it to some of the others.
I said Healy and Upset are the best bot in the West, and Healy is one of the reasons why, so it's not an overreaction.
Oh my word, okay, Trouble's going all in on that one. All right, moving on to the next. This actually comes from Astralis Zanzara. Astralis, not 10th. Plain, simple, Gulborg?
That is not an overreaction. I can totally see this happening. Did you you all saw the standings earlier,
We
right?
did,
When it
yes.
was on the screen.
It's alphabetized. You are
And
like lucky.
Astralis was number 6 on that. Vitality was 10th. So just by taking a look at the pure standings, they're not 10th.
Well, there we go. Statistically correct, and that is always my
The
favorite.
best kind of correct.
Now, talking about 10th place, the next tweet comes to us from @MP Ciccardini. I have no idea how to say that. Vitality will end 10th. That is an absolute overreaction. There's no chance in hell that will happen.
Wait, but if Astralis is gonna not be 10, someone has to take the place.
It is not going to be Vitality.
I'm obviously joking, of course. I don't think it's going to be
I definitely
Vitality.
agree with that. Big overreaction. I mean, jet lag, whatever it was, day one, it was not what we hoped for Vitality, but putting them at 10, I mean, it's a bit ambitious at this point.
It absolutely was. If you didn't catch PGL yesterday with Upset, he had some fun things to say about that Mad Lions versus Vitality game. Keep sending us your overreactions at LEC on Twitter. And we're going to continue with the show because we've seen some amazing performances by the LEC junglers like Elyoya and Maurang yesterday. Our resident jungler, Kadril, who played 82 LEC games as a jungler. 0 in playoffs. Had some 5-head pass
Trevor,
that you could use to dominate in solo queue.
Old joke. It's 2022. That's a really last year joke. You need to come up with something more creative next time. But anyway, you're completely right. It's good to have you back, by the way. Jungle pathing. 2 quick, simple things to follow. A lot of people get make jungle pathing so complicated. They think they have to do some 5-head creative pathing to out-jungle the enemy jungler. 2 simple things to realize. First one is kill potential. Now, you want to path into lanes that have any kill threat alongside your jungler. Mid lane is a very good example of that, and we can take a look at Genji versus DRX, where Pyosik did exactly that, very creative pathing. What he did was he did blue, Grump, Wolves into mid gank from bot side. Now look at the ward at the top side on Raptors from Chovy on the entrance. He thought that the Xin Zhao would either show there or gank him from there because the Xin Zhao needs red buff. That's not the case. You can be creative, you know? Just go blue, Grump, Wolves into mid, and this gank actually originated at 2020 Worlds when Tess played against Fnatic in Game 5. Karsa did this pathing and caught Nemesis off guard, and from there, when this pathing actually happened, I think this is the earliest I remember seeing this pathing in pro play and saying to myself, wow, mid laners really do get caught out by this pathing. So once this happened all throughout 2021, lots of junglers try this pathing all throughout the world with their mid laners try and get an early first blood. It works out most of the time. Just make sure you have setup in mid and make sure the enemy mid is immobile. So that's kill potential. Always path into lanes with kill potential. You know, Renekton, LeBlanc, TF, these solo lanes where you can really win out on the 2v2s. The second thing to path into is pushing lanes or priority lanes. Lanes where they can keep the push, keep the pressure, and you want to be there to stop the enemy jungler from ganking them so they can keep up the pressure, or sitting around looking for a dive, or even just basing together and moving to Herald. The most important thing about this lane is tempo. Look at Keria and Gumayushi. They're playing up. They want to trade aggressively. They want to take plates. They want to keep the wave under tower. And they know the enemy jungler is going to path bot, so Owner does the same thing. Yes, the Nidalee loses out on the 1v1 against Elim because of the red buff advantage and because he face checks the Lee Sin. But because he's playing with his bot lane and playing together in harmony as 3, they can push them back as a 3-man unit, spot out the enemy jungler. This helps out all your lanes, and it means Gumayusi and Keria, what can they do? They can keep up the push. Imagine this Caitlyn Karma was sitting under their tower while Owner is hovering on his Krugs, maybe taking a top crab. This is not how you want the lane state to be. When you have a pushing lane, you want to make sure that lane is always pushing. So make sure you pat into it. I hope these 2 tips help you when you go into solo queue as a jungler, or if you're auto-filled, and you win some games.
Well, I can only hope it's going to help me. Thank you so much for your insight, Kadril. If only your jungle pathing was as crisp as your casting, maybe you would have been able to take you to the postseason.
Trevor. Emotional damage.
Well, nevertheless, we'll take a look at our junglers today and see how they perform. Trouble and Gulborg are back to discuss some of the playstyle and meta headlines from day number 1. Let's start a little bit with the top half of the map. We saw some interesting top lane picks. I think the Corki was a surprise to me. I thought the Diana and Yasuo popped off as well. Gulborg, what else caught your eye?
Yeah, okay, so let's take it off with the Diana Yasuo. I feel like that's just a no-brainer. It's something we've seen in other regions as well, and it's just because with the buffs that came into Diana to the patch, she just became that strong. You paired up with Yasuo, great. You have ease of execution now, something that is very valuable to you as a team, specifically when you're just getting together, because you want as easy to execute compositions, so you don't have to falter too much in execution about who goes in first, what I do here. No, it's very simple, R and R. All right, great, there we go. Now, Corki top was a bit of a finicky pick. I don't expect that's a pick we'll see too much of. I think another honorable mention would be Action, but outside of that fact, I think from the top side of the map, it went very much as I expected.
And I really love the Diana pick here because it brings a lot of juice to the bot side of the map. Having Diana in the jungle, that sort of gives a whether there's going to be AD mid, AD top, which there's not a lot of options. But then you go down bot. We saw Unforgiven yesterday, play the Kathus. We've seen in the ERLs, Xerath has been picked. We've seen in the previous season, Ziggs, Syndra been played in the bot lane. So that opens a lot of opportunities for a lot of juicy compositions.
I mean, Upset was saying the same thing last night on PGL, that he feels there's so many options available across every single role.
Oh, yeah.
Just an interesting stat for you, 28 unique champions were picked and 40 unique picked or banned on day 1. That is exactly the same number as summer 2021. We talked about the top of the map. Let's move ourselves to the bottom. Lots of 2v2 action. We've been discussing the teleport changes, what we're going to see in that lane. But yesterday, Jinx and Jhin, they ruled the roost.
I feel like Jinx is one of these champions that are so good at every stage of the game. In the early games, she has so much push. She has so much harass with all her AoE. She can stay relatively safe without the jumpers, having the W to farm if she needs long range. In the mid game, she scales really well. In the late game, she's a menace. One passive is just going to run down the entire team fight. And a lot of the teams will try to counter her by taking poke, something like the Caitlyn, but a lot of others will not want to deal with it, and they would rather play something that's more aggressive on the top side, which is where the Jinx comes from. You outrange the Jinx, and you allow others in your team to play more aggressive while you're sort of the gatekeeper.
And that's the thing as well, right? Because when you get these AD carries, obviously it's common knowledge that they need to be paired up with a support that matches this AD carry. So you talk about the Jinx. All right, let's have a look through the catalog. Okay, Thresh, great one to pair it up with. Despite the nerfs this champion has received throughout all of 2021, it's still very much an all-inclusive support that you get to either repositioning with Dark Passage, disengage with the Flame Box, whatever
we've all
he
seen
does.
Thresh. What else are we seeing in the bottom lane?
So Nautilus as well is something great to come up with the Jhin. You talk about heavy topside focus, and that's great because you want to be able to move your supports up towards the top side to create picks for your solo laners instead, and that's where we get him. Obviously, Rakan, always great when you have these kind of team fight composition, especially when you get Diana. She goes in, you pile up on top, great, there we go. The only thing I'm surprised about was the fact that we didn't actually see more enchanters paired up with some of these hyper AD carries.
That is a surprise to me because when I've been watching the LCK this week, it feels like those enchanter supports are all the rage, and it's almost flipped in comparison to what we're seeing here. Do you think there's reason for that, or is it just regional?
I think we will get to that point at some point, but I also think it's because of the champions that we have there. For example, Tryndamere with Yuumi was something we've seen in the likes of LCK. It's also the fact that Karma is great into Caitlyn, something we haven't really let through yet here in EU either. But also the fact that they love to use Victor with these enchanters. So there's a lot of way for LCK to use these enchanters as well.
I think it's also the historical stylistic difference between the LEC and a region like the LCK.
Completely agree.
They like to play a little bit more laid back, a little bit more slow in the early. They always love to pick the hyper carries in any lane they can, whether that's called a Tryndamere or whether that's called an Aphelios, and they do put a lot of trust in their carries to play in the front line.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you, Viper, I'm just going to tell you, Bang. These guys with an enchanter behind them were always playing front line.
This is why I absolutely love New Year's, new seasons, because every region is playing differently, and we get to see such a variety of gameplay. Now, moving on with the show, Team Vitality, they lost their opening match against the Mad Lions, but today, their star-studded crowded roster is looking to bounce back against none other than Fnatic in our Match of the Week. Familiar names in new jerseys and one returning legend is everything we could have hoped for in our opening Match of the Week.
I think the LEC is interesting because there's a lot of new blood, but also people returning from NA, and I think that's always the exciting spot.
It's kind of like a new slate for me again, where I just want to win the LEC, and looking with a whole different team, different club would be an amazing feeling.
I kind of believe that this is my last shot at actually winning something, because if I don't win with the roster I have right now, I don't think I will ever have a better one, right?
I think this match will be just a teaser for the year. I'm excited to start.
Keep on fighting! Diving in from upset. Fnatic barreling down mid.
It's a team with upset and Hylissang, right? This team will be always about the bot lanes. We have Karzi, he's the biggest upset counter, right? He can stay under tower, he won't care if we're gonna win on the other side of the map. I know it's not like this in Fnatic.
It's really early to say if Vitality Fnatic is going to be, well, the final. My prediction would be that it would be.
Two teams have risen up with the two most promising squads. Vitality and Fnatic are stacked. But who will crumble under the pressure?
Do they run fast enough? True shot barrage! My vessel gets there!
One more on able to finish him off. Alfari over the wall. He needs a little bit more, but Perks is back into the back line to the onslaught of shadows. This is a Game 5 performance from Perks.
Yes, that tower's going to go down, but it was going to go down anyway as Showmaker looks for the ult.
There's the sleep, there's no soul unbound, and Humanoid manages to secure a solo bowler.
Wonder, he's going to take the Blitzcrank. The rocket grab's going to go, and he hooks Hansama. The knockup is there. What champion can't this man play?
Like, I've played with Wunder, so I know some of his weaknesses. I know Humanoid is like really bad at melee champions.
What?
Perks has a really big history. That doesn't really mean that I'm gonna be like scared of him or something, especially since I already know how he plays and I played against him many times.
This is the beginning of a new era for the LEC, and it starts with Vitality versus Fnatic. And this is a battle between two very stacked rosters. We want to hear from you watching from home. Who will win the LG Ultra Gear Match of the Week? Spam FNC or VIT in chat right now, and we'll track who you think will come out victorious. I think I know how this poll's going to end. These are the two supposed super teams coming into the season. The players themselves talking a little bit about how expectations would be that they are going to be in the final. Now, we talked a lot about these teams as well as this matchup yesterday, so I want to focus in on the head-to-heads of former teammates. Of course, taking a look at Humanoid facing off against Kazi and Perks versus Wunder. So where do we want to start? Maybe Gulborg?
Yeah, okay, so let's grab it by something. I mean, Perks and Wunder, they were already better apart for a long time. So for me, I have to focus on Humanoid and Kazi in the beginning, just due to the fact that it's absolutely crazy to watch these guys apart. Last year, they've had 119 games together, all in total. Back-to-back champions, once again, together. And they've kind of been the humor or jester of Mad Lions as well. So not only have they been performing on Summoner's Rift, but also when we take it off the Rift and we just look at them in person, they have been the kind of players to bring the personalities and atmosphere to this team.
See, that is a very, very, very cool story, Gulborg. But Perks and Wunder have brought Europe their biggest international success, which is MSI. Lots of titles in Europe, that's child's play for them for now, but the international title, I think, is where the pinnacle of League of Legends goes. Finals at Worlds as well, I think. Oh, come on, I saw you going like this. You know I'm right. You know I'm right. Yeah, Perks, the most decorated player we have. Wunder playing literally every champion under the sun. So I think this is going to be legendary.
I want to put a number to this, by the way. You talked about regional titles. Well, combined, these players have 18 LEC titles, 5 of whom are currently LCS, former LEC champions. By the way, I'm taking a look at the poll behind you. 76% in favor of Fnatic.
Wait, I persuaded them.
That is not a surprise after yesterday's Vitality performance, and obviously the fact that Mad Lions crushed them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a shaky start that came over for it a bit in the beginning. I don't think Fnatic were too happy about their own performance moving into that game. We were talking to Upset, but in the end he said, a dub is a dub. That's great for him. I like to take a look at it from another point of view and saying this shaky early game definitely needs to become better over the season, but he's also talking about the strengths. The individuals you still have on this roster, and the bot lane was still performing. You definitely saw in the late game, I still think they have what it takes.
Yeah, I think Fnatic at the start let in 2021 Wonder, but then they shut the door and everything went great. I think he picked up towards the mid to late game of this match. And of course, when you have Healy on Rakan making all the plays, creating all the pressure for you, you only know that the game is going to go smoothly.
The thing that's also interesting to consider is how quickly both of these teams will get to their peak performance. What challenges do they need to resolve and address off the Rift and work towards? Because it is gigantic roster rebuilds for both squads.
I think it's interesting to me that, and if I had to answer the question, I'd definitely say that Fnatic looked better in the first day, just because Vitality was not only just that they weren't performing as a team, it was also as individuals where they just had, let's just face it, incredibly stupid devs, where they either saw someone come in, especially I'm thinking back up to the top side, well, Fari's literally looking at a Nautilus walking into his lane and not walking away. Disrespectful would be a way I would put it.
I am not surprised to hear that word with some of those players. They will, of course, be the final game of today in our match of the week. Let's take a look at what precedes them. Trouble, what game catches your eye out of the rest of the schedule?
You know what, Trevor? Last season, Misfits versus Rogue playoffs, all the way to 5 games. That was a banger, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do against each other this season. It's the first one, of course.
Of course, then we'll take a look a little bit later. XL versus BDS will be a fun one for me to see how both of these squads will be competing. And of course, what performance they'll put onto the Rift. Let's dive into the first game of the day. Misfits versus Rogue. Law caught up with Misfits coach.
And Carter, thank you so much for joining me. New name, new team, new Misfits for 2022, it feels. And I read on your Twitter that you have the youngest roster by average of age in the LEC. Could you elaborate on Misfits' decision to work with rookies mostly?
Well, we already had Zlatan in our academy system, and he played amazingly last year in the LFL. So it was a really easy choice to bring him up to our main team. We have full confidence that he's going to be one of the best junglers. And similarly, Mercer was also playing in the LFL, and we were watching him throughout the year. And during our tryout process, he really impressed us. And I can't say enough good words about his attitude and his approach to the game. He's just very receptive to the feedback from the coaches, and he just wants to learn as much as possible, and he's just a sponge, keeps getting better each day, and it's a really, really big pleasure to work with him.
Well, LFL all the way, and very nice inputs on the rookies. But even though Misfits has been used to working with rookies, what makes it difficult on a coaching perspective to make these rookies work together?
Well, with rookies, sometimes their fundamentals are not the best, but we actually managed to also add an extra coach this off-season, Hiva, who's been doing a tremendous job helping with the rookies a lot. So helping to get everyone on the same page, get up to speed with some of the differences between playing in National League and LEC. So I think that the process has been pretty smooth for us. And yeah, it's going to be a long journey throughout the year, but we just try to get better each day.
Yeah, and we can see the results already. I mean, you started the season on the right foot, picking up the win yesterday. You're going to be facing off against Rogue today. What kind of adjustments can we expect from Misfits against this opponent?
Yeah, Rogue is a great team. Even though they've made changes, they've still got their 3 of their core players intact. I think what's important for us is to just focus on ourselves. We managed to win yesterday against Astralis, but we know we didn't play a perfect game. There's a lot of sloppy mistakes, and we just need to focus on not having the same issues. So being a bit more disciplined, being on the same page, and playing together as one unit.
Well, beginning of the season, actually, it takes time maybe for things to get working together. But nonetheless, I wish you the best of luck today against Rogue. And Carter, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Trevor, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Law, and thank you so much to Carter, of course, Misfits and Rogue, coming into today by both rematching the Round 1 LEC Summer 2021 playoffs. Rogue were able to clinch the playoffs spot in Game 5 and advance to Worlds. The series was incredible. I mean, while the interview was going on, Trouble was talking about it, and I think a lot of fans will remember this clip, Goldborg.
Yeah, I definitely agree, but I also think you need to remember the history behind it throughout the entire season, because this series specifically was one of the closest series and games in total between these two teams. So if you take a look at the regular season, Rogue 4-0 versus Misfits throughout the entire year. When it finally came down to playoffs, that's where I think we finally saw the best of Misfits and the potential that roster could have been, because we saw them push other teams to best of 5. We saw them push Rogue to best of 5s. And it's once again one of these moments where the big what if to come through with Misfits.
And honestly, I think what's on the screen right now speaks miles for why Rogue went through in that playoff series. It was a player that is no longer on the roster. Inspired made the 1v9 happen, but he is not there anymore. Who is there and who is replacing him is Malrang, who had an exceptional performance yesterday.
I mean, he did, and let's take a look a little bit about how he played. It was against SK. I do feel like when I watched the game that Rogue were a little more committed for some of those team fights. It was a slower game, but in similar vein to Misfits, not the most convincing of victories.
I still think it was a very interesting stylistic on Rogue on that part, because it felt like you were so used to in the past play for your jungler with the priority lanes that you had, but this time around now with Rogue, it felt like we were at the complete opposite. It felt like I now saw a jungler who was playing for lanes instead, and when they finally played for the lanes here, then we could take a look on towards the team fight where it finally felt like Rogue excelled, because last year Rogue definitely struggled with a team-fighting playstyle. They were very happy with the slow, methodical, we'll choke out our opponents through laning phase. That just didn't work when it finally came down to Mad Lions, and it feels like a little bit of revitalized Rogue, at least after day 1.
And again, I'm gonna sound probably like the biggest fangirl there is, but I felt like Malrang brought a breath of fresh air on how Rogue want to play. And Odoamne yesterday in his interview, he also said, we want to be multidimensional. We don't want to just play one game. And I felt that Malrang been a little bit more aggressive, playing towards his lane, creating these opportunities in the early game, sort of created a new way that we could potentially see Rogue play.
I mean, I'm very interested to see how Rogue develops, because every single team last year said that they could download Rogue. They figured out how to play against them. So there is a lot of room to grow. Let's turn our attention to Misfits, because yesterday, of course, I think Hirit stole the show with his Irelia. It was a great performance, and when you look at the roster changes to Misfits, Trouble, I feel like Hirit could be one of the most pivotal players for the team's success.
Oh, for sure. He was if not the sole reason, one of the biggest reasons that Misfits were able to pick up this victory yesterday. His Irelia performance was so pivotal into getting this victory, and so were a lot of his performances in the previous season. I think having someone like Razork, who is no longer in the team, was a perfect match together with Hirit, who plays really aggressive and likes to win his lane. But right now, they're going to have to figure out a better recipe than just relying on to one player making the plays for them.
Yeah, but I definitely think you can also just see this throughout the draft phase. You take a look back, you can see they're willing to save that last pick by Hirit too. They're willing to put him in a carry position, which kind of transitions from what we saw last year. You could see it in his stats as well throughout the first game. This was a guy that wrecked Hirit. And looking at how close that game became.
Yes.
If Hirit had not become this monster on the side lane, I definitely feared for Misfits' chances, which sounds absolutely ludicrous considering they're facing Astralis first.
I keep thinking to myself that Misfits and like Baron throws, Elder Dragon throws, like there seems to be a trend there. I need to actually do some digging and figure out some numbers. But we're about ready for the match. Let's focus on another two important players, two LCK imports facing off against one another, Malrang and Hirit.
I mean, Malrang said it in his interview with Ashley Kang, right? He's like, the one that I really want to face and I really want to be is going to be here. It's going to be the Korean action that he's looking for in the LEC.
As soon as we come into 2022, there's so many personal revenge stories that are on the cards.
We just hate each other, vendettas.
Misfits is looking for revenge against Rogue. Will they prove superior? Once again, it's time to find out as we kick off day 2 of LEC Spring with Medi Vedi.